Okay, your mic is live, so.
Banter, banter.
Are we good to go? All right.
But you don't need that. Charlie needs that.
Okay. Just don't make it a crotch shot, please. There's actually a website that deals with the 10 best robot crotch shots. And I remember one of them is this robot sculpture in San Francisco. I think it's since been removed. But it was right across the street from, it was in a nice neighborhood in Pacific Heights. And all the neighbors were pissed off because they didn't want this robot sculpture with the large penis. But we digress.
Well, in Sacramento, we have the crotch art.
Well, anyway, Martin, and I was reading Chuck's original fourth article when he was working at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and they said he couldn't download the data from the star and process it and display it in real time. And he said, "Oh yeah." And I've always wondered, how the hell did he do that? And I finally found information about a Taylor detector, which takes a signal in and samples it at 0, 90, 180, and 270 degrees, and then processes it to get I and O signals. I and Q, excuse me. And so now I knew the term to search for, and I discovered that they're using these in software-defined radio, software-defined radar, software-defined sonar, and I'm interested in something called optoacoustic or photoacoustic spectroscopy, which they use pulses of light to briefly heat a gas or a solid, and then the sound that's produced is picked up and processed. Could be processed by the same kind of circuit, and to produce a spectrum. And then there's all kinds of stuff they can do with that. They can diagnose all kinds of things from looking at your urine or your breath. They can use it for environmental studies. And so I'm thinking, I'd really like to see a board that can do all these things. You could do a lot scientifically with it. And so I'm interested if anyone is interested in hacking such a board.
Did you say your name?
Martin.
Can they find you on the internet by searching for Martin?
Martin Schaff. And
What would you like if people want to contact you that aren't physically here? If they're out on the interwebs, can they send an email to Dave, and Dave will have your email address?
okay,
Okay, so maybe give Dave your email address before you go.
okay.
Was that heard down with people out there?
No.
What you just said?
No.
Somebody should probably announce that.
Why don't you just repeat that? If you want to contact Mark,
Oh,
email to Dave.
and what's Dave's email address?
It's on the website.
Okay, so if you want to contact, send email to Dave on the website.
You figure if they can't find Dave's.
Gossip, announcements, comments, nastygrams social media. All right.
My new internet need. Transgender.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah.
Well, I guess we don't need that on the active microphone. Thank you.
You're gonna get comments and then you take the best ones or the ones that you can print and then turn the mic on for them?
Yes. Right. I suspect that is part of the process. 5 second delay, right?
All right. So just so that I feel like this is exhibiting some semblance of control, oh yes, it says introductions, rumors, and gossip. So it was interesting. One of the numerous email newsletters I get talked about rescuing a satellite that had gone silent. And the International Sun-Earth Explorer, IC2 or IC3, there were several of them. They got together some new hardware and some new software and got some time on Arecibo and actually opened up a dialogue with this thing that had gone quiet. And so if you are interested, you can look up the IC3 reboot project. And
Skynet.
yes, exactly. No, that was SkyCorp actually. But,
Oh, sure.
and on O'Reilly's website, they have this thing called Radar. It's Radar O'Reilly. And it has nothing to do with the talk show Blatherer of the same name. And it has nothing to do with the MASH character. But it does appear to be an interesting site. Their subtitle is Insight, Analysis, and Research about Emerging Technologies. And if any of you are still in doubt about which O'Reilly it is, it's the O'Reilly publisher of the Nutshell books, for example. And I think that actually, I guess in Taiwan, there was Fourth in a Nutshell. But we digress. I don't think there was ever an English translation other than the one Ting scrawled on the back of a napkin one day. Works for me. So this is interesting stuff. Has anybody else come across anything of interest? John's sitting there and interesting stuff is leaking out of his ears. But, continue.
Anybody going? O'Reilly stuff, you need to search for, an image search for, O'Reilly assembly.
Well, that's a good. I've never seen. Yeah.
Assembly lube. I wonder what that is.
Assembly lube and valve compound. Okay. A bit more. O'Reilly Auto. Yeah. A bit more.
So what am I supposed to do now? How do you get an image search? Didn't there used to be a thing on here that says images?
Under more now.
Is it? Oh, that's what you were saying. I get it now.
Oh, look for images.
This is hung up in our wall at work because of course this is the line of work we're in.
What did you know with the assembly?
Oh, cool.
This is the first.
People were
The brain will talk about
View image. Right?
View image?
You might as well just kill yourself now. The author, Bob Johnson, with his therapist.
You just aren't gonna do this. It's, we were saying this in the restroom downstairs too, is those kids downstairs are doing things so fast, running on top of what we've already written, that we can't keep up anymore.
Yes.
This is that.
But you have to realize those kids running on top of what we have written, the we includes a bunch of people that have written crap. Well, of course.
Of course. Right.
The entire body of work of Microsoft, for example.
That is the chaos theory. Yeah. It is all chaos.
Anybody remember the Tower of Babel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Microsoft Foundation for that.
You know what? I'm not sure whether Unix is also.
Well, but what I'm saying is the history of all the little side trips.
There is much more Babel in Unix than there ever was or is in Microsoft. In Windows.
Yeah, but it's
Windows, DOS.
it's less secretive though.
Yeah,
You can go read about the Babel in Unix.
yeah. You can say, oh, this is Babel,
Yeah.
right, in Linux, right.
Especially Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
right.
can say, oh, well, what are you doing here? You know, as opposed to Windows is what?
Yeah, period.
Well, yes.
Speaking of interesting things, there's a YouTube video on the Kursk submarine disaster. Go figure. No, that's an ad. You can skip this ad in 4.
3. Well, not anymore.
No, I stopped it because, frankly,
Oh, the white collar holler, yes.
So if we don't come up with more rumors, you're just gonna keep showing us this stuff, right?
Well, you have to have music. You have to. I'm disappointed you replaced this with me.
George Carlin's rant in one of his last things of, it wasn't white collar, but it was
Blue collar?
When he played the cardinal and Dharma.
no, a whole bunch of Dharma, a whole bunch of not the 7 words, but it was one of his last concerts.
I wish you were here to condemn things on baseball.
Really.
so in my youth, I listened to this great comedy recording about the pursuit of happiness. How many of you are familiar with the thing of which I speak?
TV show. I can't read this stuff. All the S's look like F's.
Yeah.
I forget what show it was.
Anyway, the guy that was the driving force behind that particular recording, and I'll leave it as an exercise for the students to look that up, but he passed away a few weeks ago, a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So may he rest in peace. He gave us a lot of good laughs and inspired a lot of the stuff that you see to this day. So with that, I think that we're going to call a quick bathroom break and a time to have Charlie connect his computer up to the display and on with the show. I'm going to turn this
All right, this is turned on. Anybody know if it's working?
It is working. I have bars.
Can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay. For anybody out there watching, my name is Charlie Shattuck. I'm going to talk about our stenography, Arduino, and Forth. And I've been allotted an hour. I'm very nervous about whether I'm going to be able to fill an hour, but we'll see what happens. Maybe some questions. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. So, as long as I'm out here, I want to show you. I've been obsessed for the last year and a half. Well, I can hold it up too. Doesn't that work pretty well?
If you want closer.
Well, but I can't see. I can't get any feedback.
And I don't need
Feedback is that screeching noise when the microphone is too close.
I think it's fine to just show it. I don't really want to show it. Okay.
But you do have to hold it still.
I think it's better if I hold it up there either way.
Okay.
This is my second prototype. We're going to show it the first way again. Tell me when we're back. Okay, so I started out saying, I've been pretty totally obsessed for about a year and a half, probably going on 2 years with stenography, amateur stenography, because I'm not very fast at it. I guess about a year and a half ago, well, okay, I'll start with this. 10 or 15 years ago, Bob, how long ago we started doing Dvorak? A couple of us started just switching over to Dvorak keyboards about 10 or 15 years ago. And it was painful, it was hard, but I liked it better once it got going. So I've always, and of course I always was interested in Chuck Moore's 3-key keyboards. I've always been interested in different kind of keyboards. So about a year and a half ago, I heard about something called the Colmac layout. It's kind of a cross between ASCII and Dvorak. I had never heard of it before. And the nice thing about it is that it doesn't ruin all the control key combinations that you tend to like to use, like the C would be over with close to your left little finger with the, and it was supposed to be just about as good as Dvorak. So I thought, yeah, I'm tired of Dvorak. I'm going to see if I can't go learn that. So I started switching over, just for fun. I guess I was bored. But as I was searching the internet for keyboards and things, I ran across something called Plover. P-L-O-V-E-R, named after the bird. And for some reason, you're supposed to pronounce it plover. And I saw a science show where the scientists were calling the birds plovers, but we're supposed to say plover. I don't know why. But about 6 years ago, a woman who does captioning in real time, CART, C-A-R-T, for deaf and hard of hearing people, who used a stenography keyboard and could keep up in real time. When somebody would talk, she'd type it up and it would show up on the screen. She was really sick of using the proprietary software that you have to use to go with the steno machines. By the way, I'm going to get to the point where I show you what a steno machine is. I'm jumping in the middle. So she started an open source project, basically. And after about 4 years or so, she had it to the point where she got some programmers to help her. They wrote a Python program that would translate the output from a steno machine into characters that would go into the operating system for whichever kind of computer you want to use, meaning Mac, Windows, or Linux. And you could use a steno machine to type things for your computer. And about a year and a half ago, she started totally doing her business with her own program, Plover, and quit using the expensive, like $2,000 plus $500 a year maintenance programs that she used to use. Let's go to the next.
Does this company with the proprietary software have some kind of stranglehold on it? Did they get a sewer?
Apparently not.
Good.
And this might be part of the reason. Machine stenography is over 100 years old. This machine right here, the website I got it from said it's from about a 1926 model. And the keys are exactly the same as what we use now. So that part hasn't changed for more than 100 years. This is a representation of the paper tape. You can see, I don't have a stick and I didn't bring a pointer, but you can see the
laser pointers are in the room right now.
Yeah, I knew there'd be one at least. As soon as I left the house, I said, oh yeah, I know right where it is. This machine has ribbon, just like an old typewriter. And the old machines, thank you.
The laser is that button there.
The one that says laser.
Well, yeah, little doctrinaire,
Okay.
but what do you want?
Here we got ink ribbon, just like in an old typewriter, if you're old enough to know what a typewriter is. And back here we'd have a paper tape. In the back of the machine would be a tray that would hold really narrow tape, kind of like a cash register tape. But it was custom. It came out in strips. I'm doing this for you, but it came out in strips that were, well, it folded into strips. It was a long, continuous, folded piece of paper. And it would print stuff that looks essentially like this. There would be, what do you call those things? The hammer kind of things on a typewriter. And well, when you press a key, a hammer in the back would hit the ink on a piece of paper in a particular position. And there's an order that the keys go in. It goes over here, S, T, K, P, W, and so on. H, R, A, O, asterisk, E, U, blah, 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 blah. And if you start learning stenography, you probably should memorize that. And I can do it, I'm just not very fast. And the order is kind of important because it's a mnemonic aid. But originally, before the computers came around, this paper tape is all you had. You type really fast. You use chords. So each line, I mean, in this, oops, this first line, 4 keys got pressed: the K, P, A, and the asterisk. What that particular chord means, in Plover at least, is please capitalize the next word, but don't print a space before. Plover automatically prints its spaces before each word, so you don't ever have to press a space key. So what this actually says is, start capitalizing. TH, this is the, so a single stroke says is the, because ST means is the. Way, the paper tape would look if I were, let's see, using an old, let's see, good question. What does that mean? Huh? No, actually PH means M. BG means K. Mech. Oh, mechanical. Mechanical. That's short for, okay. So having a computer, I don't need to be able to read this stuff anymore. It used to be a court reporter would be typing this stuff all day long. This is all they'd have. They'd take it home, and then they'd read this and type it up on a typewriter. That was not something I would have wanted to do. That did not motivate me to, yeah, right. But now, well, in about the 80s, I think, they started, you know, when microcomputers came around and got cheaper, they started making translators on computers so you could plug, well, not this machine, but a more recent machine, something like this, into your computer. And I see this machine has the paper tape, this pretend paper tape display. This one probably doesn't have any paper tape in the back at all because they pretty much don't use that anymore. It has similar keys. They don't bother putting the letters on there because if you have to look at it, you're not going to be typing at 240 words a minute.
Mr. Burns' secretary.
Did she? I got to find that. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, they started making programs you could run on your Windows machine or whatever where you could type on this, a serial port would be plugged in the machine, and then you could store your stuff on the machine, or you could see it, or you could copy it out of the proprietary program into your word processor and print it up, that sort of stuff. Trouble is, the machines cost anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000, and the software costs like $2,000 plus. And from what they say, it's kind of buggy software. It's not the most wonderful stuff to use, and the people that make it aren't that. Yeah, well, they're not that responsive to having.
It is certified for courtroom use.
Fine. Well, that's a good question. I don't know. The people that I'm reading the people that did this are not court reporters. They're cart providers. So I don't think anybody would use this for court reporting, this Plover. But a lot of the people that are doing cart, meaning captioning in real time for the deaf and hard of hearing, a lot of those people are starting to use Plover now. And also for sometimes they do it like in a conference, a cart provider would be sitting in the back somewhere, or maybe right here. And everything I say would be printed out on the side here with their machine. There's also, of course, you know, if you watch the closed captioning on TV, somebody uses one of these machines connected to some kind of a computer to get all that stuff to appear on your TV. Okay, so the problem was too expensive, too proprietary. Nobody's going to do this for a hobby. It's ridiculous. So this woman named Mirabai Knight, pretty cool name, started this little open software company, basically a company, but it's a little group. And they started doing Plover, which is free. The software is free now, and it works nicely, but the hardware was still expensive. Well, the nice thing is that the software would work with an NKRO keyboard, which is like a slightly expensive gaming keyboard where every key you press will be registered and will go through. Most keyboards, if you press a chord or press the whole key, you only get 2 or 3, and then it gets confused.
So
But the,
high-end keyboards in the old days, the old QWERTY keyboards were N-key rollover.
that's what NKRO, yeah, N-key rollover mean any number of keys. And there are, a lot of the gaming keyboards now, and starting at about $100 a keyboard, will do that. And so you can just spend $100, get some free software, and try to do this on that horrible, offset keyboard that you're going to get. It sucks. It's not fun because the offset, it really bothers me. Anyway, where's my pointer? You can get a kit for this little guy from Italy. Yeah, he's from Italy. A guy who, this is also open source. You can print your own if you want. It's a 3D printed case. It has electronics underneath all that. And this will spit out either NKRO signal pretending to be a keyboard, or it'll spit out a serial signal pretending to be a more standard steno machine. There's a number of standard serial protocols that they use. And there's one really simple one that I used for my machine. This is one they've been talking about for a year and a half. It's called the Stenosaurus, which is kind of cute. That's a prototype, and this one is supposed to have the translation stuff in the machine, so it's going to be nice. You just plug it in, the USB cable into your computer, and you're going. You don't have to put any kind of a mediator program on your computer. And they keep saying any day now we're coming out with this, but I just gave up. I gave up quickly because I didn't want to wait for it. And now I'm happy enough with my keyboard. I don't think blog site, looks like. Okay, here is my, yeah, that's the next one. This was my 4th keyboard that I made. I left this one home. Pardon? F-O-R-T-H-O? Yeah, F-O-U-R. It's the number 4. I've made 5 of these so far now. And I'm going to stop now for a while. The first one was pretty awful. I just slapped stuff together. I didn't think about where I was going to put the computer, so I have keys up here, and then I put this big old Arduino Mega down here because it's the only space I had left on the board that I put them on. And I had to reach over it to do it. It was stupid, and I don't use that one anymore. My second prototype was a little better. It's this one that I showed a little earlier, and I like the layout a little better. You can see the lines there, the crosshatches. I had to drill a lot of holes, and they were done by eye largely because they didn't all match up with the holes on the board. So, yeah, I didn't make any mistakes with those. I made a lot of wiring mistakes. And I had to cut wire. I had to cut the whole batch of diodes I had to cut and move them over somewhere else. I was horrible, but I'm getting better and better. This was my first idea for how to do it, though. This I used for about a year, and I like this one. Except I wish that wasn't quite so close together. Both hands are sharing the middle key. But it was nice. It was a little frustrating that I didn't get all the holes lined up exactly, so me being a little bit OCD, I wanted to be a perfectly straight line down everything, and it kind of, you know, wobbles a little bit. So somebody posted, yeah, it does look good from a distance. Somebody posted on the internet, well, on the Plubber, what is it? The Plubber Google group site, yeah, that they had done something with this top plate here from a place called Ortholinear Keyboards, and I'll have that up on the board in a minute. You can buy this plate for $15, I think. It's pre-cut. I guess it's steel. It's really heavy. The holes are in, you know, really regular, so it looks perfect. They're exactly the right size to take the Cherry MX keys switches that everybody uses, the mechanical key switches. And so I ordered one. Apparently the guy makes them after you order them, though, so it takes 3 weeks, and I can't, man, wait 3 weeks for something now? It's miserable. Well, you think it's laser? I think it's metal, though.
Yeah.
Really, laser?
No, it's
Yeah, right. It's cut, right? Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. I don't know if the guy owns it. I should ask him sometime, or if he.
There are places that you can just upload
Yeah.
CAD drawings.
Well,
Make this, and basically
Yeah.
it's untouched by human hands.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
put on your CAD drawing.
Oh, I should
your
get close to you.
credit card, and they send you back metal.
Was that?
And it's mostly used for wrap panel.
Yeah. What's that place you use, Bob?
Yeah, I've used it a lot.
Frontpanels.com. Yeah, it's a place called frontpanels.com where you can get Front Panel Express. Okay.
A 19-inch wide
Yeah.
rack mount panel.
Yeah.
With buttons and knobs and dials and things that go deep is trivial.
Right.
Well, I've used it before, and I did basically a rack panel with anodization and punches and everything else. And it was like $50.
Okay, well, this is 15, so this is a bargain, isn't it?
Even
But-
if I were to sit down and make that myself and pay myself minimum wage, and if I had
Yeah,
all the tools, all the stock, everything sitting right at hand, to do that for $50 is just not possible.
Well, okay, then 15's a bargain, isn't it?
Wow.
This is pretty good. It's got more holes than I needed. This is designed to do it's a 4x, what is that? 4x, yeah, 6x4 is 48. It's a 48 key keyboard that these people make as like hobbyist keyboard makers. But you know, it looked perfect for me. I leave some holes here where I put the little Arduino computers under the FTDI friend, and it's all hand wired underneath, but you can't see that, can you? So you don't even know how awful it looks. It's a matrix. It's a 4x6 matrix of keys. So every key has a diode coming off of it. And let's go to the next slide. Yeah, here's what the layout looks for my keyboard. And this is, you saw this these on that 1926 model. These are exactly the same layout as we've had for more than 100 years. These, for some reason, they used to think that your left little pinky was useless, but your right pinky could handle 4 keys, no problem. I don't know why. Or maybe it's just that, well, maybe there's more reason to it but on this side, this is supposed to be 1 key, but you know, I use 2 keys. We all use 2 keys because that's how it's more convenient. But they mean the same thing. S, T, K, P, W, H, R. That's your left hand. Well, also your left thumb does the A and the O. And sometimes your left hand goes over and presses one of these asterisks or one of these number keys. And your right hand's over here with a few extra things. T and S go over to D and Z, you know. Now, these characters are pretty much mnemonic to help you remember how things work because they don't really determine anything. There's a huge, huge lookup table. There's 23 possible characters you can press, so there's 2 to the 23rd possible combinations, which is pretty big. And it's surprising how many aren't being used when you go, because you can make up new combinations anytime you feel like it, customize them. If there's not a word in there that you already know, if you want to type a word and it doesn't understand what you're typing, but you really like it that way, you can quickly say, from now on when I say this, that's what I mean. I want to quickly tell you how this, if I don't, yeah, actually, eventually I'm going to want to talk about fourth. But this is more interesting to me right now. The way that the mnemonics work are, your left hand handles initial consonants in a syllable. Your right hand handles final consonants in a syllable, and your thumbs handle vowels. So basically 3 characters, you know, like got, G-O-T. Of course, there's no G here, is there? We'll get to that in a second. So that's, in the simplest terms, that's the way it works. You can type a whole syllable in a single stroke because it's chords. You notice, though, we have to do all of the consonants that exist in this hand, and there's only 7 letters here, right? So for some consonants, you have to use 2 or 3 characters, 2 or 3 keys at a time. PH, that's M. TP, that's F. KW, that's Q. Let's see, HR is L. PW is B. TK is D. And you quickly learn, it's not hard to learn these. It didn't take long before I knew them all. I don't have to think about them anymore. And they're spatial, you know, you get used to things being in a particular space, a particular shape, so it all eventually makes sense. Interesting, the G is all 4 of those keys. So you have to with these 2 fingers, you have to do 4 keys, G.
All 4 at the same time?
All same time, yeah.
Because you're on the edge of the key.
Yeah, the home row on this keyboard is the space between these keys. Yeah, which isn't very much space. They're pretty darn close together. As you saw here, I mean, they're pretty close. My new one's even closer. And the real expensive ones, I think they're even closer. They just fit really seamlessly. So, so that's how you get all the consonants in the left hand. Also, you can finger spell, they call it. If you don't know how to do the chord, you can spell the word out long. And to finger spell, you just press one of the asterisk keys with your right hand, and you do the consonant key in your left hand. So A, B, C, D, E. Well, okay, your right hand comes in when you get to the E and the U, and so on. And Z gets to be all 4 of those plus that one. Pretty awesome. 6 keys with one hand.
Is I, A, and O together?
I is E and U together. Good question, though, yeah. E and U together is I, right. And as far as the vowels go, there's a few other tricks. This is pretty much the short A, the A, generally speaking. Although, like I said, you can literally do anything you want. You can make anything mean anything. But the general mnemonics is just the A key is the A. But if you want to do a long A, you press the opposite 2 plus the A. That's A. If you want to do a long E, you press these opposite 2 and press the E. A long U, a U sound, press those 2 plus the U. And then let's see, the ah sound is the AU, those 2 together. The oi sound is OEU. That's probably about it. Can't think of anything. And there was E. Oh, yeah, if E and U are the I sound, then adding the other 2 makes that, well, that's the I, the short E, short I, but the long I is all 4 together. I. And then look at this. We have consonants over here, but they're a whole different order. They're different because generally in words you have different consonants that are different frequency of consonants in the ending part of a syllable than in the beginning. So here we suddenly have F. Oh, look, we got R again. We have S again. We got repeats. We have T again. It looks kind of weird the first time you see it, but you learn the system over here where you, these 2, the P and the H were M here, but its P and L is M over here, a little bit different. There's a whole key for G here instead of the 4 over here. BG is K, K. And I could go on for a long time. I probably should stop pretty soon. There's a few standard endings like shen, GS is shen. So,
Ing,
pardon?
ING or NG?
Just the G is ing. Add the G on the end, you get ing. In fact, there's some logic in Plover where if you type a word and just put the G, it even knows how to fix up the spelling. I don't know quite how they do that. I have to look at the source sometimes. Putting the S on will make it a plural, and sometimes it even adds the E, sometimes it doesn't. It's clever. Putting the D on the end makes it past tense, ED. Let's see. Our BGS to all those three together are kishin, cation. So fiction would be F, I, ction, fiction. So you have those two, and those three, fiction. This is way too long. We're going to move on. We've got people falling asleep already, I'm sure.
By the way, the part of the typewriter that strikes the ribbon and the paper is a type bar.
Type bar, huh? And the platen is the thing that it hits behind the ribbon. I remember that.
Right.
Platen, yeah. Type bar. I never heard type bar.
Yeah, I remember that.
Huh. Okay. Let me see.
You don't have to know that anymore.
No, you don't.
After the past 15, 20
I did learn how to touch type on a real mechanical keyboard. I mean, mechanical typewriter, 1970. No, 69. Okay, here's my bill of materials. I'm going to show you this stuff a little bit later. Bill of materials. I needed 34 key switches. I got those at mechanicalkeyboards.com. Let me pause for just a second. At some point, I'm going to have up on the web here where you can find it, my GitHub site where I have all the source code, and 2 of the documents that I'm going to be using today are up there too for documentation. And this bill of materials is up there in one of the documents. So most of this stuff you'll be able to find once you figure out the secret of where my GitHub account is. So I had to buy 34 key switches. You can buy them in a pack of 50 for $29. That's what I did. I needed 34 keycaps. I got them from WASD Keyboards. I don't know how you pronounce that, but I call it WASD. I liked it in 2 colors because I like to distinguish the. Oh, I didn't say much about it. Anyway, I like to distinguish the letter keys from the function type keys, which I'll get into in a minute. So let's see, the top and bottom plates from Ortholinear Keyboards. You saw that top plate, and there's a bottom plate and hardware that puts them together. That was 15 and 10 or 14 and 10. I got, okay, right around there, plus hardware. I used an Arduino Pro Mini that I got from Adafruit and the FTDI Friend that I got from Adafruit. Now we're finally getting into the 4th part. I already had a soldering iron, some wiring USB cables, so. And of course, my labor was priceless, i.e. free. So the total was about 120 bucks for my last keyboard, which you'll see a picture of soon. The earlier ones were a little less because I bought a really cheap piece of board, prototyping board that I drilled holes in and glued the keys on. It was really tedious, and that prototype that I showed, this one, prototype board, drilled a lot of holes, hot melt, glued it all together, and hand wired from the back. Very tedious. And I did 3 of those. Okay, let's go to the next document. Hang on a second. Quite yet. We'll talk about this real quick, because I'm not coming back. Yeah, I got to admit, I had a slightly more up-to-date version of this, these slides, but they're on my computer back at home, my Windows machine. They didn't make it to my Linux machine that I brought. So this is my first prototype of the slides. Oh, the MyForce Arduino, I'm calling it, the software that I use to program this thing. And that's going to really be an anticlimax when I finally get there, because it's like 1 page of really simple code. It's not ANSI at all. It's tethered, And I don't understand why people are so obsessed with putting a whole compiler on a little 8-bit computer with hardly any memory, and it just seems crazy. I like a tethered fourth on an Arduino, but it seems like me and Fourth Inc. are the only people that care about doing it that way. Everybody wants to have the whole thing. I don't get it. Anyway, that's enough of that. I have 16-bit stacks on this one. There's a My Fourth for the 8051 that I wrote a long time ago. Bob Nash here in the audience uses it a lot, and he's given some talks about it here at SVFIG. That was an experiment in an 8-bit fourth where I had 8 bits wide stack. That didn't make as much sense to me for the Arduino. Because for one thing, we have some 16-bit registers on the Arduino, and it's one of those load and store risky type architectures where you can't do anything in a single instruction. You have to load it to a register, do something, then put it back out in memory. So if I'm going to do that much, I figure I might as well get 16 bits instead of 8. Like array fourth or color fourth, which I've been obsessed with. That was my obsession before Steno. Conditionals don't pop the stack. You know, when you say blah, 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 if, blah, 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 then, your standard fourth, the if will eat whatever the flag was off the stack, and you're fine. Array fourth, my fourth, it just leaves that number on the stack. And so you have to put your drop someplace. Eventually you have to drop it. And I don't know, I think it's they're equally good. But this is simpler to write and fairly simple to use. So this is the way I do it. It's basically an assembler, but it looks a lot like fourth. I don't know how many of you have done or dealt with fourth assemblers before, but there's such a thing as fourth compiling where you get into compiling mode and then all the words behave differently. They start putting themselves in the dictionary. And then you get out of compiling mode and then you're back to interpreting mode. When you do an assembler, you write all these words that are all in interpreting mode. And even though they might look like you're compiling, you're just executing those words. As you come to them, you execute them, they put some stuff down in your target image. So I think of this as an assembler. The tools that I used were Linux and Bash, GForth, Vim, my favorite editor, and I have a syntax coloring file, my own custom one for that makes it look kind of like ColorForth. AVRDude is the name of a downloading program. It's the one that the Arduino IDE uses behind the scenes, but you can use it directly. And Minicom is a communications program, serial comm program, so that when I have on my target machine, I have a standalone interpreter you can't compile down there, but you can interpret. And so you can interactively debug stuff. You just can't compile new words. Okay.
The colon's on the host.
Yeah, right. There's no colon on
There's an interpreter on the target.
Mm-hmm.
Are there integers on the target?
Integers, yeah.
Awesome.
Integers, yeah. Yeah. I can probably show some of that.
Okay.
This might actually take an hour. It might take longer. I have to finish by.
No, it won't take longer.
I have to finish by quarter after, right? Okay. Good. This is great for me. Maybe not for you. So in the bash command line, I've got 4 scripts: C, D, M, and T. See, I like to type that kind of stuff. C for compile, D for download, M for monitor, which runs Minicom, and T for test, I call it. C just invokes GForth, loads the job file, which is where I have all the stuff that loads, the force system, and says bye at the end. So C will compile your target image and put it in a file. What's that?
That's the beginning.
Okay.
Stan Freberg presents the United States of America, Volume 1, the Declaration of Independence. My apologies.
Okay.
I should have muted it before I brought up the link.
Okay, the D command downloads the project to the AVR using the AVRDude program. M does the monitor by jumping to, by running Minicom, and once you've downloaded things, and if the default is to abort rather than to turnkey, then you'll be able to do your interactive testing. T stays in G4 for testing or decompiling, because there's a decompiler down there. Okay, I think so. Let's find the next thing I want to talk about. Good, okay. Now I got to get my mouse over here. Oh, it goes over that way, sorry. Yep. All right, here's that bill of materials I mentioned earlier. Same thing. Here's some pictures. I got a different bottom plate for my latest version. It comes with a nice little, really nicely carved hole here in the back, but there's no way you can fit a FTDI friend there underneath a key. There's no space. I don't know what they're thinking. Or I think that what they're thinking was they're going to do their own printed circuit board that has just a little FTDI or USB connector sticking out. So since that didn't work, I got a hacksaw out and cut a new hole in this place where I wanted it, right there. You can see when the first thing I did when I got the top plate was I put all the Cherry MX red keys, right, in there, the places where I wanted them. I cut the hole in the bottom plate. Then I got some hot melt glue and I glued the FTDI friend, that's what you see there, and the AVR Mini on the other side. And hot melt glue, I was hoping it was an insulator, and it turns out it is. I got the computer glued in, I put wires across there, and I immediately tested it to make sure it still worked. One of the keys for me to build, for building, and also for programming, is test as often as you can stand it. Be really obsessive about testing, because as obsessive as I was on this particular one, I still made wiring mistakes, stupid wiring mistakes, so frustrating. And if I hadn't tested every wire I soldered, I would have put a whole bunch of stuff in there, and I would have either thrown in the garbage can in frustration, or I would have had to start over. So before I actually started wiring, I made a couple of tables. A couple of, I call it a wiring diagram, but it's kind of, what we got is, this is a picture of the keyboard upside down, because I know it from the top, but I got to wire from the bottom, and every time I have to switch around and remember that this one is the, the right-hand side, it doesn't work for me. So I made one that I could look at this and see what letter was where. So this is, here on the left, we got the right hand. Everything's backwards. I got colors because my plan was to wire these, it's a matrix, right? A 4x6 matrix. There's a protocol, a serial protocol Steno machines like to use called TX Bolt, where the machine spits this out to the computer, and Plover understands it. It's 4 bytes. Each byte in the top 2 bits, it numbers the bytes. So 2 clear bits in the top is a byte number 0. If bit 6 is set, that's number 1. Bit 7 is set, that's number 2. And if they're both set, that's number 3, byte number 3. The other 6 bits are the other 6 pins that we're reading, the other 6 part of the matrix. So each of these colors, we got red, we got blue, we got green, and that's sort of yellow. Because these S's are really, that should be a slightly darker. Yeah, I really should have made that darker. Yeah, because that's 1 key, yeah. John asked why there's 7 green, and it's because S is really 1 key. So each of these keys, on one side of it, a diode comes out, and it's wired so that the black mark on the diode is away from the key. I don't even understand the electronics part. All I know is once I wired it the other way, it didn't work, so then I learned to wire it this way. And you know, a diode keeps current only flowing in one direction, whatever that means, because, anyway. But the reason you need the diodes is so that you don't get current bleeding in from one key to the next. You're basically isolating your keys. So if you can, when you press 6 keys, only those 6 keys are going to register over on the computer. So all the red keys are connected through diodes to a single space that goes to a single pin on the micro. And that pin, when it's activated, then we have the potential for pressing a key and having current flow through that key to one of the other pins. These 6 keys are all connected to a group of 6 pins on the micro. So if we've activated the red group and I press the L key, then that's probably pin 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably. I'm not sure. I've lost track of it. But one of the pins over there is going to light up. So so the way you read the keyboard is you activate one group, read all 6 bits, which cleverly happen to be all in one port, so you can read them as a byte. Read them one at a time. Read them 6 at a time, and then you mark that down someplace. Remember it in a variable, and then you make those wires float again, so your no current can flow. And then you activate the next group, and you do the same thing. So you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, watching for keys to be pressed. Remember, there's these asterisk keys in the middle. On the old 1926 model, that was a single key, but it's too much trouble to come up with a big key. You know, it'd be custom. Basically, I use, and this is what most people do, 4 separate keys that are all wired in parallel. This one, the one key it goes through the diode, but these are just wired in parallel across. So if any of these keys is pressed, the current will flow through the diode and into the micro. Similarly, the number keys. I haven't talked about numbers yet, but all the keys across the top are the same key. On a real steno machine, that's just a bar that goes across the top. And what that bar is for, or when you press any of these keys, which is like pressing the number bar, then suddenly the keys underneath it become numbers instead of letters. So if you want to type the number 1, you press those 2 together, number and T. If you want to type 2, you press number and L. If you want to say 12, you can press both of those at this, both of those plus any number key, and you get a 12. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. So that's enough about numbers. So let's see. So that helped me. The first batch of wiring done. Did I call those columns or rows? I called those rows. The 4 rows got wired that way. And here's the first one that I did. You can see, I'm not sure if you can see easily, but each switch has a pin there and a pin there. Just 2 pins. And so I picked the one up on the left. It really wouldn't matter because current will flow either way. But you attach a diode, the little black parts there away from the pin, and then all 5 in this case of the diodes connect together in the middle. And then in the middle, there's a wire that goes over to pin number 2, or actually Arduino port 2 on the microcomputer. So that's the first one. When I got this wired together, I tested it with clip leads right away to make sure that, one, that every switch would work, didn't have any shorts or opens, and that I had the diode in the right direction. So I put the wiring together, went over and ran a test program. Then I went ahead and did the same basic idea for the other 3 groups, the other 3 columns. So you can probably see little bits of diode there. Now, once all the columns were once all the rows were together, then I had to wire the columns, meaning I'd have to pick the 6 pins on the micro that were all in the same port so that I could read them at once. And those would have to be wired to one of these, at least one of these keys. Let's say to port, I call it port A0, the analog port 0. It's called analog port, but it's really a general purpose port. Was connected to 2, and then a wire would go from from the S over to the R. And then another wire would go from that R over to the F, and then a wire would go to the F to the T. And then those are the, that means that if a particular row is active, right, when I read the port, if what I get is pin 0 is high, if pin 0 is active, let's say, I need to know if that means that I've pressed S, R, F, or T, and I determine that by which row I had activated. So if I've activated row 0, it's probably going to be S, and so actually it's the other way around, but that's how it works. That's good enough. But this is what I did for my 5th keyboard that I made. And I made horrendous mistakes on the first several. There's one where I stupidly wired the whole thing with the diodes backwards. And so, without testing, I didn't test it. So I had to cut every diode and then slide them over here and solder them somewhere else. And that is just an ugly, ugly mess under that one. I did a lot better. This one here was the second one I made. And you might, I don't know if you can see at home, but here you guys can see there's a lot of wire wrap wire here all over the place, right? It's hideous. And it's even more hideous behind here where you can't see it because I've got it screwed to a board. But slowly I learned that if I used pattern here, I could get it pretty close to being right. And I did. I only made like 3 mistakes out of all those keys. And they were still really irritating. So here, this shows when I've started wiring. This is one of the column pins. It's wired over to this key. This key's wired over to that key. So I've just started there. I've got like half done there. And once again, I put in the real the final program that I pretty much knew worked, and put up that paper tape display that you saw earlier. And every time I'd wire one wire, I'd go and run it and test it and see if it was right. And that way I found my mistakes right away, and I could fix them quickly. And I highly recommend that. It's the way to program, and it's the way to build stuff for me, is test, 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 obsessively. So there's, once I got all the wiring done, I think. And that's what my final keyboard looks like, more colorful. This version has a nice little folded up plate on the bottom that hides everything, so it's really pretty. So I've got a few more minutes. I'm going to finally talk about the well, because I figured I could write simpler software if I wired it, if the wiring matched what I want to do in the software. Why not have a synergy is what I figured. Yeah, you could do the people that buy those things and make 4x12 keyboards, and that's the way the printed circuit board that's out now works. So you got a 4x12 matrix, so that means you have to read those things, and then I have to move them. And see, there's a protocol where the bits are in a certain order, and I didn't have to do anything to match the protocol. All I had to do was mark the top 2 bits to say which byte I'm in, and then ship it out the serial port, and it's done. If I did it like that, I'd have to read each bit individually, or maybe I'd read, a bunch of bits at once. And by the way, you only got 8-bit registers to read in, so 12 isn't going to work. You're going to still have to do it clumsily. And then you're going to have to pick each bit out, say, okay, this bit here is set, so that's the bit in the protocol. This one here, okay, that's that bit in the protocol. And I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to read it once and send it out. And you'll see in just a second. It's really nice.
Charlie,
Yeah.
that's how you do object-oriented programming. You would analyze your requirements. You can say, please build
Okay.
in hardware versus doing it in software.
Yeah, I'm skeptical, but John's saying that's how you do object-oriented programming, where you analyze the requirements. You decide where to put the work, I think, and how to divide up the work. Yeah, and I figured, the wiring was a little bit of a pain, but I love the way the software turns out. I'm going to show that now real quick. So remember earlier I said there were 4 scripts. So we got C, D, M, and T. And this is the project folder. Each project folder has a main.fs, which gets loaded by job at the right time. And each one has a chip.bin once you've compiled, because that's the name of the image. And the tags is part of, there's a tag files for Vim. But I had to customize a long time ago, the E4, excuse me. What's the other editor? Emacs, yeah. I had to customize the Emacs version because I had never been able to figure out Emacs, but I made it work for Vim. So now I can, in theory, I can go look up whatever I want. It knows to go to the word go once I've compiled, because the compiling is what makes the tags file. So my main program, it's 62 lines long, so it'll fit on a page, right? It's pretty small. But the way I do variables right now is, C variable is a word that looks at my current pointer in RAM where I have in variables, puts that number on the stack and increments that. That's all that does. And then this number sign compiles it as a literal, or assembles it as a literal, or assembles, the literal with that number thing, and then exits. So basically, this is a lot like saying C variable B3. So I have 4 byte-sized variables. Head like this and it's different. I don't think that matters.
Don't turn your head like that.
Okay. Now, you want to have a weak pull-up on the port C pins because you want them to look high most of the time, but only weakly high. Port C pins are the six pins. And you make them, okay, this init word here, I hope that red shows up at home. I don't know. The init word
you're gonna send Dave a link to your stuff and people will
You-
read it this afternoon.
Right, all this stuff is on the GitHub site, and it's all except for the not very interesting slideshow at the beginning.
And we'll forward it.
Okay, do it, yeah, please do. Anyway, init does the assembly language that does weak pull-up on the port C pins. Now, when you program an Arduino with the Arduino IDE, then you can just read the simple, quick stuff and copy people. But if you're going to program it in Forth, you got to get the data book for the AVR ATmega 328 and look up what these what you need to do to make things happen. It's not quite as easy, but it's more fun. So I made those other 4 all inputs. So basically I've got 6 pins that are weak pull up now, and the 4 other pins are floating. They're inputs. So there's no current flowing anywhere here. When I want to activate column 0, I make pin 2 an output and I drive it low. And that means current's going to flow now, if the switch has been pressed. When I'm done with column 0, then I change 2 back to an input and make it float. Same thing for the other columns. The word read reads port C. It's actually called pin C. You read the value of the pins on port C into the T register, which is top of the stack, and you invert them because I like to see them as 1s instead of 0s. And the electronic, what's the word?
Negative logic.
Yeah, it's negative logic. Thank you. Because we got pull-ups and we need to pull them down to activate them. So 3F number XOR inverts that so that it looks right. This bottom line that's commented out is because on my 4th keyboard, I made a wiring error and I didn't notice it till I was really tired. And so I had to do a little bit of software to swap a couple of bits, and that's what that was. But I've got everything perfect in my last keyboard. Okay. I made up a microsecond word, and since this is one of those keyboards that has a crystal clock on it and actually has timing, this is pretty accurate, pretty close.
Very accurate.
Yeah. So I wait 10 microseconds. That's pretty close to, I haven't looked at on a scope for this, but earlier I did. I've looked on an oscilloscope with this on Arduinos, and it's pretty good. I came up with a word called or store C, meaning C character or byte, and you'll see it down here. So my look word, when I look is the big word for reading the keys. I activate column 1. I wait because I'm not sure why, but if I didn't, it didn't seem to work nicely. I think, yeah, I think electricity has to move or something. See, I'm a software guy mostly.
Oh, bounce.
Yeah. Okay. So I activate column 3. I wait 10 microseconds. I read port C, all 6 bits. I dupe that and I or store it into the variable B, 0, and leave it on the stack while I'm at it. And then I deactivate column 3. I do this for each of the columns, but that residue that I left on there, I OR all the way through. And if at the end of that I've got a number that's not 0, then I know one of those keys got pressed. And it's really handy to know if any keys are pressed or if there's no keys pressed. Now there's a millisecond word that is also pretty accurate. Let's see, 0 goes through and puts zeros in all the variables. These are the variables for that protocol, TX Bolt protocol. So when I scan the keyboard, I 0 the variables, put a 0 on the stack, and I begin the loop. I drop what was on the stack. I look and see if any key is pressed, and I do that until a key's been pressed. It's because look leaves a number on the stack. If it wasn't pressed, I come back here and drop it, and I look again. So I just keep looking in a pretty darn fast loop, seeing if there's been a key press. If there's finally been a key press, then I wait 5 milliseconds. That's to debounce the key press. And then I start watching the same kind of a loop, but this time I want to loop until there's no key press, until I get a 0 out of there. Okay. And so at the end of that, I have a flag. Why is there a flag? I forget. I don't have time to tell you why. Okay, the protocol is read byte 0. If it's there, emit it across the serial port, and then drop. Oh yeah, that 0 word. It didn't actually 0. Yes, it did. Huh. Someplace in here I've got to set those top 2 bits, and I don't see where that happens right now. So next time I talk, I'll figure that out and tell you. Oh, I'm sorry. Here it is. Here's what happens. Yeah. So second byte, read it. If it's non-zero, set that 1 bit that says this is byte 2, emit that, and then drop. Okay. Next byte, next byte, next byte. So I've spit out potentially 4 bytes, or maybe just 2, because if you didn't.
Your if seems to be different. It means something on the stack.
Yes, and yeah, that's what I said earlier. We don't drop the conditionals, right? And this is the way array forth works. If you use a green arrays chip, you got to get used to this. If you use color forth, you got to get used to this. So I'm used to it.
Scan comment, it doesn't leave a flag.
What's that, scan?
Scan doesn't leave a flag.
You're right. So that comment's got to go away. Thank you, John. I'll fix that. I thought it was going to for a while, and maybe it didn't. Anyway, thank you. I'll fix it, I promise. Okay, so go, the main program, init, begin, scan, send, again, that's it. Notice there's no semicolon there because this isn't really a forth compiler, it's just an assembler, and I'm not exiting. And begin again as an infinite loop. And that's it. My time is up. Any questions that only take -1 minute? That's exactly why it's there, because I intend to drop. Where was that?
Because it's there whether if takes.
No, the if leaves something on the stack. A flag. Well, it's a character, really. So if I want to emit it, see, I want to, no matter what it is, whether it's true or false, I want to drop it at the end. I only want to emit it if it was non-zero.
So you count for the thing that's on the stack, even if it doesn't take the if.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Otherwise, you would have to exit after the hit or
Something.
something. Yeah.
This is convenient. It's not a big deal, is it? I'm used to it. I'm used to it for years now, and it just looks really natural to me. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm curious how fast you got to roll.
Oh, me? I knew somebody's going to ask that. Let me preface by saying I'm really happy with typing this way. I hate having to type individual characters at a time when I have to do it. It's really frustrating. But that being said, I only can type maybe between 30 and 60 words a minute. It depends, sometimes slower. And the world record for typing this way is 360 words a minute. If you want to be a certified CART provider, you have to pass a test where you've reached, I think it's 240 for CART. It's 225 for court reporting. Anyway, pretty much you have to get well over 200 words a minute to be a professional at it. But, pardon? Oh, all day, 8 hours a day sometimes, and with very little break, yeah. But you know, you're not pressing, what I love about it is I'm not pressing many keys. Like, oh, darn it, I'm running out of time. Yeah. Yeah.
Really smooth.
Well, these are the lightest keys that you can buy. Yes, it is smooth.
I've had keys where I press on some.
Yeah. Right. These are mechanical keys. They're like 45 grams of pressure to get them to happen, and they don't have a knob that makes you a tactile knob. You know, you don't feel a click or anything, and they don't make a click sound. The professional ones, they can get down to like 20 grams. They're lever based, much more expensive and finer. So, but yeah, these are so easy that I rest this finger on the R key and I get R across there a lot. So one of my most common typos is the word R, A-R-E. Okay, I got to stop soon, but yes?
So how much customization
Me? I do it all the time, but I'm kind of still a beginner. I didn't do any at first, and I wanted to learn how they did it. But lately, I've been doing custom things to be able to do the command line in Linux and Vim. Like I've got CD, I've got CD dot dot. Actually, okay, CD dot, the CD dot dot, and I'm just about to make it do the carriage return too, because usually I want to make sure I hit it right before I press carriage return, but I know that one. I just soon. I've got LS, I've got MB, all those little things you want to do about. I got SCP and CP, those kind of things. And I've got a few Vim things. Like I've got save file, which goes down to does the colon, goes down there and does a W, and then lets you type in the file. And that's the S and the V. Anyway, it sort of roughly looks like save file. Yeah, exactly. And you can make it whatever you want, so it makes sense to your head. You don't have to follow anybody else's ideas. No, you don't. You do have to press. There's a stroke, a DUPD, dictionary update that you press, and then, in fact, I'll show you real quick. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, it shows up on the other screen, but here.
Well, you do it there. Another question I had related is how hard do you find it to avoid collisions with things?
It's amazing. There's 2 to the 23rd possible, 2 to the 22nd reasonably, because you don't really pay attention to the number. That's a lot of, it's really a sparse matrix of stuff. And it's amazing how often I decide I want to do something and nobody's used that one yet. It's just incredible. You don't really understand how big numbers like that are sometimes until you start dealing with that. And then a lot of times, now that we got this, and down under here, unfortunately, it only shows me the first few, but there's a bunch of ways to type transfer. Somebody has what they call a brief here, which is very few keys. That means transfer, turfer. But you can also transfer. That one's purely phonetic right there. Trans with a Z for. This is something they call. What do you call it? It's a misstroke. They put in misstrokes. If you make the same mistake, like you're trying to go for one, and you make a mistake of hitting this extra key, you say, I'll just make that one mean the same thing. And then if I make the misstroke, it's going to fix it for me. So there's so much space in there that more than half of the translations in there are misstrokes, it seems like. Yeah, self-correcting stuff. RNA? Oh, right. The thing is, though, you get to put those in, so they're only things that make sense. It's not Microsoft deciding it. You really wanted to capitalize that, right? Nope, you get to say what it's going to be. Does that help? Okay, anything else? Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks a lot.
You are.
Let's see.
10 minutes ago.
Sorry, Bob.
He's fine. Get the mic, start talking.
Oh, yes. So sorry.
Is it already on?
It's on.
That's where I always have the problem.
Is that where you always have the problem?
Yeah.
If only my problems were that simple.
Yeah, well, whatever. Okay, so this is, okay, we're in here?
Good.
All right, well, this is partially show and tell. Unfortunately, these things are so small that, did you say you had a macro camera here? Oh, I'm Bob Nash, by the way, Bob Nash. And my presentation is about development with little Internet of Things type modules. And the first module that hopefully you can see there, is based upon a Wi-Fi to serial chip. And there's a million flavors of these, but the most popular one's based upon an ESP8266 chip. And if you just look for that on the internet, you'll see a jillion of them. That one cost a little under $4, I think. And you can talk up to 115 kbaud serial to it, and it will connect up as a TCP server or TCP client, or you can handle up to 4 simultaneous connections, that sort of thing. And it'll do most of the internet protocols. I think you can even do pings and so on. The microprocessor is programmable. This will integrated with the Wi-Fi antenna. ESP8266. And there's a micro on there. I don't know too much about it, but it's quite capable. You can get an IDE from the manufacturer who's in China. In fact, if you do and you talk to it with an AT style command set, remember the old modems where you have AT this and that? So if you do AT plus RST, and send it to it, it will come back and it will have thinker.com, I think it is, or something from China. And if you go there, it's all in Chinese. But they make a nice little microprocessor and an IDE that you can download, and you can program the processor. And you can program it in C, or there's another language that's sort of C-like, sort of like Sketch, that is Lua, I think they call it. I don't know too much about it. But you can program that chip. It knows all about the protocols, and with the basis of the library that knows about the protocols, you can add commands to it. And there's a lot of people doing that, and you could make yourself crazy trying to go to different varieties of the chip that have been pre-programmed. However, if you just take the raw one, it'll do most of what you would ever need to do with TCP type protocols, and it'll do UDP too. So anyway, $4, and it does take 3.3 volts only, and it will draw up to a few hundred mils. I just used 250 as sort of a ballparkish current draw on that, so it does take a little bit of current. And so if you're trying to run this thing on batteries, I'm going to get to that later, because most Internet of Things, you sort of want to have them low power if you can. This isn't necessarily low power, but there are ways around that, and which I will get to later. And if I just keep pushing everything off to later, I won't have to explain anything. Oh, I'm timing out. So there's not too much to say about it. You send these commands, you can set up servers, you can set yourself up as a client and connect up into, and you can download, whole HTML pages from Google and all that kind of stuff. And it's fun to play with. There's lots of Python programs out there that you just run. You take a USB to serial converter, plug it into your PC, run your Python program, and it will set these things up for you. And there's good code examples and stuff. I mentioned Python in a fourth group just because I've been learning Python lately. So a lot of things I did in Python, even though I could have done them just as well in G4. But I just, there's so much code out there that's sort of already done that does this kind of stuff. And a lot of the examples and learning how to use it were also in Python, so I had to at least grok Python well enough to understand the code examples. And I like Python. Some people hate it. I think I never could understand Perl. I've tried and tried and tried and never could get to a place where I grokked Perl, but Python is pretty cool. I like it all right. And C, it's just always there. It's just always C, and you're always, I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to check my notes here, make sure I covered everything with the ESP 8266. So I'll get into my current project using that is to have a number of different remotes, and people are doing this all over, a number of different remotes that wake up and deliver temperature or switch contacts or PIR sensing to a server. And of course, there's a lot of examples. Again, I hate to use the P word, but Python has got a complete socket server that's along with its distribution, and you just bring it up and you take one of these and you send some AT style commands, not very many. I have code examples if anybody's interested, unfortunately still in Python, but anyway, and configure this thing, and they'll come up, deliver the data and go away, and there'll be numbers of different ones asynchronously coming in, delivering data to the server, and I'm running it on a Raspberry Pi, and works fine. So you comes up and you got all this temperature data from all these different remotes. Well, these remotes, what do they look like? Well, in addition to having one of these, my current version uses the chips that I had been using before, which were the 8051 series from Silicon Labs, because the processor was cheap. Well, it's not the processor, it's the board. That's one of the lessons I've learned lately, is that the processor itself is way under $1, and it's nice. I'm familiar with the 8051 instruction set, and Charlie's My Fourth is just a great programming environment for that. But by the time you get that chip on a little tiny board with a regulator and bypass caps and all that kind of stuff, you're talking about something, if you're making your own PC boards and chopping them up and all, you're still looking at like an $8 product. And so I had gotten my remotes done with the 8051 version, and I decided to go to an Arduino. And that's the other part of the thing. Here's the other show and tell, which you've probably all seen in Arduino. And connected to that is the Adafruit FTDI friend that Charlie mentioned, although there's clones of this available from China, and of course clones of the Arduino available from China. But I got these for $3.23 each, the Arduinos. And I think the Adafruit clone is around about a little under $5 for some. Huh? The FTDI friend clone. Well, from Adafruit, it's $14 or about $15, and the Adafruit version of the Arduino, the Pro Mini, which is what Charlie used, is I think around $10. And I just happened to have purchased an FTDI friend from Adafruit a long time ago, and it's very nicely done and all of that, Buy American. But anyway, this total combination, if you buy it from China, is probably around $7 to get started. And that's one of the things I wanted to emphasize. I hadn't gotten started in Arduino stuff because it's too difficult. It turned out to be so trivial. I mean, I couldn't believe it. One of the things well, anyway, I'm trying to convert my little remote system now to use the Arduino, and the rest of my talk will pretty much be about that kind of effort. But before I get to that, here's another version of the something using that same ESP8266 chip, and it's got extended commands and everything, and I think this cost a whopping $12 or something, but it's nicely shielded. That's one of those things that those aren't very well shielded, and it's got an antenna connector, and it's got a really nice multicolor LED. I'm not quite sure what that's about, but and a switch contact and all that. And this is sort of designed to be a remote, but it's also got a place to connect an antenna, so you can put a rubber ducky with these things and get a lot better range. That little chip there, I've had it all over the house and been able to connect it Wi-Fi, no problem. With a rubber ducky, I've been able to get down the street quite a bit more range. If you get a disc cone antenna, which are around $20, or there's instructions on how to make them, which are very interesting in themselves. But if you do that in a little cable, put it up near the top of your roof, and you got a little bit of gain and everything else like that, you can get many, many blocks on your little Wi-Fi router. So I don't know. There's one guy in England that tells you how to make your own gain antennas for 2.2 gigahertz stuff, and it's great. And he step by step tells you how to cut out the tin and and how to make the cones and how to spray it. And but he uses a complete network analyzer. That's the word I'm looking for. And he says a lot of the designs you see aren't correct.
Probably the only one in this room that I know of that has access to an S-band network analyzer.
Yeah. Well, I think he's retired in England someplace, and he bought one of these. I looked at his lab, and that's basically all he has. And he makes, there must be 100 different designs of different antennas. Disc cones was one of them, but there's all kinds of weird designs that he had made and verified on his antenna analyzer. And he gives you a data sheet that has full-size patterns. You can download as a PDF, which I have, and you can make your own disc cone for, I don't know, a couple hours work and trivial. He cuts tin out from coffee cans to make them, but anyway. But I am digressing. Anyway, the Pro Mini boards, first of all, things I have learned as a neophyte to using Arduinos. Well, there's a jillion different formats of boards for Arduinos. I'm just going to talk about the Pro Mini because that's the only one I've dealt with. But first of all, those little things, they plug directly in. This one happens to plug in upside down. But if you get them orientated correctly, the little programmers they sell plug right in. Just get some stake pins, and panel, you're done. Or you can use the cable, socket-to-socket cables like Charlie did. They come in two flavors. And beware, they're both about the same price on the internet, but the Arduino Pro Minis come in 8 megahertz versions and 4 megahertz versions.
860.
Huh?
8 and 16.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8 and 16. 8 megahertz and 16 megahertz. And one is if you're going to operate it on 3.3 volts, and the other one is if you're going to, the 16 is if you're going to operate it on 5 volts. And if you want a schematic of it, you go to Adafruit, and for their little product, you can download a schematic, and I checked it out with the loop and everything. It's identical to the ones you're getting from China. And the 3.3 version has a 3.3 volt regulator, which doesn't, at least on mine. I put 5 volts in and expected it to regulate down and put 3.3 volts on the chip. It's 5 volts on the chip. Well, it's an LDO regulator using a PNP pass transistor and all, and I'm not sure if the 5 volts is quite enough to get it to regulate at 3.3. I don't know what the problem is. There's another pin called raw, and that goes in through a diode that doesn't seem to go anyplace on the cathode end, the band, but it looks like it's designed to just put a jumper across, and then you can use an external, like a 3-volt battery or something like that. The chips will go down to 1.8 volts. That's important for the low-power battery stuff, okay? But not at the full clock rate. I think at 1.8 volts, it'll run at 4, I think. Don't quote me on that, but anyhow, it's a very capable chip. That's one of the things that I was really surprised at. First of all, it's a 328P. The P means pico power, and it's very low power. In dead sleep mode, the sleepiest mode they have a number of different sleep modes. They rated it something like 1/10 of a microamp. And you say, well, yeah, what good? You put it into sleep mode and you never hear from it again. No, they have a watchdog timer on board that runs off a separate 128 kilohertz clock. You can run the board on the 128 kilohertz clock through software, or you can have it wake up, I think every 8 seconds is the longest period with the clock, and do something and go to sleep again. So if you were, for instance, using the Arduino with the chip that draws 250 milliamps when it's transmitting, only about less than 5 mils normally though. You just wake up and it's got an internal 8 megahertz clock if you want to use that, or you can use the 8 or 16 megahertz crystal. But all you really have to do is wake up long enough to send some commands at 115.2 kbaud to this little chip, configure it, send a data packet, and go back to sleep. So you wake up every one scenario would be you could wake up every 8 seconds, see whether or not your transmission interval is a match, or whether you've got a temperature violation or something like that, and then transmit and then go back to sleep. There are regulators that are shut down, low dropout regulators for about 50 cents. So you can shut the rate, you can have your battery pack, let us say a 6-volt battery pack, that drains down to like 1 volt a cell. You still got 4 volts. And this, if they're FET, low dropout things, differential as low as 350 millivolts is okay. So you can have the battery pack with very low dropout, and it has shutdown. And when you shut it down, it shuts down. I did some measurements with some very sensitive current measurements, and it's down to leakage current across the FET. So that's one way that you can use these things. Even though they draw a lot of power, you can have the battery last for about a year, I calculate. Lithium-ion batteries. Well, they got a problem. The problem they have is self-discharge. It's one thing they don't see. So if you get the lithium PO, the lithium polymer types, they can have discharge rates of 5% a month. Yeah. Depending where you get them. And of course, those are the most convenient little packs that you get from China that have the little JD connector, which I hate. But anyway, they have a little connector and stuff like that. So now this is just theoretical. I've never tried using them and see how long they last. But if you just use regular Leclanche carbon zinc, that's the word I'm looking for. The carbon zinc cell.
Flashlight batteries, as we used to call them in my youth.
Yeah, if you just use like the AA cells and use 4 of them, and then regulate down to 3.3 periodically, and then maybe even tap them in the middle for 3 volts to run the processor on, it'll last a long time. And so that's where I've been going. And I'll finish up here with a quick overview of the Arduino itself. Like I said, it's a pretty nice processor. I had done an AVR processor with Charlie many years ago, a 2051 processor with the same architecture, and I'd forgotten about it till I got back into it. So I used Charlie's My Fourth Arduino from GitHub. I just downloaded it. I said, well, how hard is this going to be? Not hard at all. With Linux, I just said, give me AVR Dude. And it'll install AVR Dude programmer for these things separately. You don't have to download the IDE, although there is a Linux IDE for it, as well as a Windows IDE, but I think you have to program it in Sketch or something. But anyway, you can get install AVR Dude, download Charlie's software, and plug into your little mini USB connector, and edit the Charlie's file for the D file, which is the download file, and change it for like TTY USB 0 or whatever comes out on your computer, and that's about all you really have to do. And you just type in, then you type in D and Charlie's system, and it comes up and downloads the darn thing. You have yourself a program. And the first one I downloaded was his Steno keyboard. And I also did a little thing that flashes a light and tests the interpreter, just loads his standalone. A little note on your standalone interpreter, Charlie. When I compiled it, 1,762 bytes. Of course, that's mostly because all the instructions are 16 bits for the AVR. So you use about twice as much stuff. But for the 8051 standalone interpreter was 467 bytes for the 8051. Huh? But that's just because of I think the architecture of the AVR.
It also does a little more. It has full-size words, not just count plus 3. So you need to look those things up. And yeah, mostly it's the architecture different, but it's apples and green apples and red apples.
Right. Charlie pointed out, for those of you who didn't hear his comments, is that the standalone interpreter for the Arduino has features that the MyForth for the 8051 doesn't. And I've noticed a few of those already myself, which are really nice. But I was up and blinking lights and programming and stuff within just a very short period of time. So with MyForth, the Arduino from GitHub, and $7 worth of stuff, you're ready to go. And it's got 32K of flash. The processors I was using had 8K, and I ran up against that wall in a recent project, and I was sitting there trying to save bytes and stuff. It's nice to have the 32K. Of course, again, you're probably not apples and oranges, probably about 16K if you figure the extra size of the instructions and all, but still 16K versus 8 is, I got some breathing room. It's 2K of RAM, which is nice because the 8051 has 256 bytes of static RAM for the stacks and stuff, and then I think another 256 bytes of XRAM, they call it, which is static RAM, but you can use it for buffers and stuff like that. So 2K is very nice. You can do some really nice things with that 2K. And it's got 1K of EEPROM. I haven't used any EEPROM in years. You write all their flash, so I've been putting everything in flash. Yes?
Just a disclaimer, I haven't done it either, so MyForth doesn't know how to deal with it yet, so you get to start from scratch with EEPROM.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Charlie had mentioned that the MyForth for the Arduino, he hasn't got the EEPROM stuff in there, but it's very straightforward. You just have to define a few registers and stuff, and it would not be difficult to extend it for that. And so I don't think you see that's any big deal. Anyway. Let's see, I'm trying to see if there's, of course you can, the boards, you can put the little feet on them, put them in a solderless breadboard and develop on that. I think Dennis here has one that he's done that way. That's very nice for development. I'll show him your.
Switch over to this guy. This is a different one.
Oh, okay, yeah. But it's an Arduino-like thing. Actually, his is an Arduino thing with a Bluetooth. Oh, no, sure, yeah, I'll be done. In fact, I'm just trying to make sure. Well, the low power is what had me concerned. Looks like low power, you can run the Arduino with a low power, especially through the raw input if you're running it on a battery. And then it's got, I don't know, 18 pins of I/O, 2 10-bit analogs. This is the Pro Mini. A lot of pulse width modulated pins that can be pulse width modulated. It's got an analog comparator. It's got multiple timers, SBI, I2C, and of course the UART for the serial. So I would say that if you're interested in all, in cheap stuff using Forth, it's worth trying out. And that's it. Is there any questions or? All right.
on here.
So just be sure to turn it off. John.
Can you hear this okay? See if the, yeah, can you hear the mic level? Okay. You have bars? Okay. Bars is good. So Stan.
Because this thing is, because it's coming through my computer.
Yeah.
It does not take the microphone and put it to the headset.
Oh.
So I can't hear it.
You can't split it off, huh?
Well, it's split, but I can't, it won't let me hear.
I hate that. All right, we're fired up. Is back on the mic?
We are cool.
Okay.
Got bars and grills?
I got bars and grills.
Bars and grills.
Okay. So we're just going to go over some disk imaging technologies, software-wise, dealing with also backup and restoration challenges, dealing with disk imaging, and some changes in the good old manufacture of motherboards, such as UEFI, which is quite interesting. So to start off, we're going to talk about manufacturing firmware changes, file system landscape of UEFI, GPT, which is taken on because of the new, how would you say, disk sizes that are available today, partitions and limitations that are implemented in certain operating systems, image utilities for both Windows and Linux. It does also work with Mac as well.
Forgive the feeble-minded, what does UEFI stand for?
That is coming up in detail. You get to wait. I just added the full disk encryption section here, and also all the source web links that I came across. So the first thing is industry push for a new standard. It is not everywhere yet. People are still using on cheaper motherboards. They're using still BIOS related technologies versus UEFI. UEFI has been around, and it's an Intel concoction created in the mid-90s. But Windows 8 really pushed it because of adding certificates in the BIOS to kind of lock things down, dealing with GUID technology, and basically GUIDifying the world, kind of like the UUIDs that are out there today. It allows secure boot, but the secure boot options actually, as you read into this, is that they actually create virtual machines inside your machine, which is in the BIOS that run the secure UEFI modules. It's quite interesting. This I actually found just yesterday, which is, you can see the link below if you want to download that from the slide, which I will give to Dave later. UEFI firmware basically interface, or unified extension firmware interfaces, to your question, Kevin,
will replace your basic input-output system firmware. It is created by Intel for the Itanium processors, just for compatibility and uniformity. It's kind of like trying to unify all the problems that BIOS actually has as far as who's programming it, and you've got one central body that will provide it for you, so to speak, even though it's implemented by all the manufacturers. And it's the bridge between your firmware and hardware, and it's kind of independent of the operating system itself. Why UEFI? The BIOS basically has got its limitations, both in bit-wise as well as size. And the UEFI offers both 32-bit and 64-bit that, of course, everything is now Windows primarily all 64-bit push for everything. It does create a global unique identifier table for every machine that's out there. So on top of the system's UUID, which is basically a unique identifier for the machine, it's kind of like its own GUID. So if you're using like IPv6 or something, which again is a unique string, you can link everything together to find where that system is anywhere in the world, if you were to go that general direction. So there's no hiding the machine anymore with this type of technology. It does provide network authentication, cryptography built in, supports for extensions in non-volatile media, which is internal to the UEFI modules, integrated boot manager. The shell environment can run other EFI manufactured programs that you'd have to get, just like a network adapter card. You have to have your own manufacturer ID, then you can actually send out all these EFI applications. And it also does diagnostic. Well, there are pros and cons to this. You got flexible modules, multiple OSs, doesn't really matter. It is written in C with BSD license, supports both IPv4, 6, secure boot with internal VMs within the BIOS itself. I added this little pro-con from a page that I saw, that the UEFI can actually support remote diagnostic of the machine minus the operating system. So in itself, because you have a unique GUID as well as an IP address, if you're using IPv6, that it can be located with the right tools to be able to identify the machine and do any updates and things to the machine without you actually knowing about it. So there are it's good if you're the person doing the controlling from the network aspect. It's a con if somebody else is doing it without your knowledge.
Have you seen people actually use that remote?
No, I have not. But I have known that there was a story a friend of mine told me about Intel, that you could get into any machine within Intel through their tech support and not even need the password to get into the system, which, since they're the people who implemented this, they could have had this technology out there for a while to get into it. It's almost like a backdoor to access the machine remotely to maintain them, which is a great thing for internal IT,
Yes.
you know, to do. But it's also, you know, if you're looking at the CEO's system, for instance, and, you know, that could lead to some other odd things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the cons are it's error prone and there's lots of code. It is C code. It is running a VM within a VM inside the modules that are in there, both manufacturer. And you can create your own certificates and upload your own code to it. So, you know, there are, you could brick your own thing. The architecture is pretty straightforward. You have the legacy mode where it allows you to do things the way you used to do them under BIOS, or under UEFI, you could lock it down based on a whole bunch of parameters and unique firmware tools, ROM, interfaces, drivers. They can all be built in, and it's stored to, you know, when we talk about the GPT partition, all those little things are stored within a GPT partition module there. So you got a couple types of services, which are boot services that interact with the firmware, console text, block level devices, imaging drivers, and so forth. So you can make it, you know, either variable or unique to the specific hardware you're on. And you can also run things as a service in the BIOS, which basically will run as long as the operating system is active. So, which is kind of interesting, but, you know, not surprising that standard BIOS does this, but it's all done now through software. There was an instance of UEFI bricking, which I found, which was kind of funny. You can do this with any BIOS, but obviously, since it is all software driven, you know, when you find a bug in there and you trigger it, you could just make your machine worthless. And there's no recovery from that, as far as we know. So now we're basically changing from MBR limitations to GPT, which the old style was your standard master boot record. You had cylinders heads, which have a specific bit limit, size of RAM, and all this other stuff. Now you have the beautiful GUID partition table that's available to us that expand and it's also part of the EFI standard and supports 64-bit pointers, which of course gets you to the 9.4 zettabyte size of disk that you can actually get to. And, you know, that's interesting. When you start looking at that number, I mean, that's huge. I mean, 9.4 billion terabytes. I mean, you can only imagine what that is. No, you can't. No, it's really hard. So what's really great is that it is part of the UEFI standard, which of course seems to be coincidental in the two. You do have a maximum of 128 partitions on a disk, 124 actual with 4 MBR protective partitions for your standard MBR boot compatibility. And then you have, of course, your 9.4 zettabytes of space that you can allocate. All the partitions have a GUID on there, and of course it also prevents, it has redundancy built into the whole process. It mirrors it, kind of like the old MBR had a backup record. So if you had access to it, you can actually replace the MBR from the, you know, tail end of the disk and then boot back up. It does have Linux support. Linux is now using, you know, Grub 2, which Ubuntu, you know, supports for GPT partition boot, you know, dual booting and everything. So it's kind of interesting. Now, zettabyte, when I did some research in, they got Zebib. It's like, what the heck is that? And so I took this off of you know, Wikipedia, as you can tell, the little link down there. It's the International Electrotechnical Commission has a decimal and a binary, like they need to make it any more confusing. 1000 versus 1024. And it's like, okay, so they created this new table just to make things more fun. So I thought that was just kind of funny and annoying at the same time. GPT file system basically is broken down. As you can see, you have a number of partitions entries you can have, which are usually 4 in the beginning, and then you have your primary partitions, then you have your backup GUID partitions and tail. Here's another look at that. Just a standard Windows 8 partition. You can see on the left-hand side there that you have an RE tools, which are Windows 8 tools that it kind of puts into play. You got a FAT partition. You got the 128 meg even though it says unformatted system reserved partition, that's where it actually stores additional partition entry data, all the GUID tables and so forth. Then partition 3 was my OS, and then we have a NTFS partition, which is, and these are specific sizes that they control and set up to maintain this EFI type of bootloader compatibility. And then of course my D partition was 20 gig. So this is another breakdown. It's more a little bit clearer on how it actually is configured. So you have your MBR partitions in the front, then you have your partition table header, which then controls the links of all the partition or GUID tables that are on your system, and then all the entries for the directory entries or partition entries there. Then your backup GUID partition. Now this does promote some challenges from standard 32-bit software that I used to use to try to, recover an image disks, and those don't work with this type of partition. It can't read it, it doesn't understand the tables, and you end up really, which led me down this whole path of what works, what doesn't work, based on some challenges that I've encountered. Here's some Windows OS schemes and limitations. If you look at the very bottom there, that actually Windows imposed a file system limitation of 256 terabytes. For whatever reason, I don't know, since you have, 9 zettabytes to play with, but that's something I found quite interesting. Here's their kind of breakdown from their site, one of their help pages based on their reason why that they want to limit how big something is. They have only 64K, at 4K clusters, you're up to 256 is standard. But I don't know why they would want to limit that besides them coming up with the next generation operating system to sell you on. But that's fine. So your Linux and Windows OSs that are available to us today, you can see that as it progresses from the FAT16 world through EXT2, 3, 4, the riser, and of course the development of the B-tree file system, which is kind of interesting. It does have this very close to the same size of disk that you would want to kind of use under GPT, but it's still under development and it's not widely used out there. So GPT is probably going to be picking up a lot of that slack till that particular file system comes, into play. Here's some basic features that I kind of threw together a list of whether you're using Windows, Linux, or Mac. That these are some general things that you want as far as features within the software. Not all of them are necessary for like cloud storage and so forth, but so now we're going into some Windows utilities. These are kind of ranked based on things that I've used, and their popularity out there. Some of you probably already know what some of these are if you do run Windows platforms. Now this is now the differences in cost. So R drive, or R drive image, is kind of nice. The reason why I kind of threw this at the top is that it's inexpensive. You can run it on a server, and based on their server license, you know, on a per server basis, that's pretty darn cheap. Most other ones can cost you up to several $100 to $1,000 per license, and they're not transferable. This one here actually says, you know, if you crash your system and you have to rebuild it, you can reapply it, and it's not, you know, going to be counted against you, which is kind of nice. If you decommission the server, you can reuse the license. It is proprietary. It is compressed format, like most of them. Markham Reflect is a European manufacturer, but what's nice about it, I do have a Windows 8 Home Edition. It does work on it for free, which is nice, but of course, there is versions, obviously, as you can see, that you can buy for the server license, which is $250, which is it's not too bad. Obviously, if you're doing Exchange or SQL, it's a little bit higher. It is proprietary, but what's nice about it is that you can actually convert to VHDs. The higher end servers and license for any of these softwares can export to VHD, so you can bring them up virtually if you need to, which is kind of really good besides just making their proprietary image file. The bottom one is kind of like a home inexpensive version. There is a free version of that software, and I'm going to go over some of the basic features of each of these. So R drive image, standard, this is their screenshot of their software. So you can definitely create an image. What's also good is that you can also mount the image. So you don't, it's read-only, obviously, but at least you can actually recover single files or whatever out of that image as you see fit. So all these applications also do recognize GPT. That's the whole point of learning about these types of tools, that you can see how from the previous pictures on GPT, how it has those header, 3 partitions in front and 2 in the back, which make it kind of unique, and also screws up all older software, boot tools and things like that that have not progressed to accept the GPT format. So once you've selected, obviously, that particular partition, you can export it out to an image file. And then the main thing is always check your image. As good as any software is, if you don't verify the image, you could be SOL if you archive multiple versions of that and something went wrong. One of the interesting things about this is from their FAQ about, obviously, Windows 8. This also will go for Windows 2012 and any other version that supports UEFI. And it's interesting that they talk about, obviously, let's go back. The secure boot does interfere because it doesn't do legacy boot options. Most of these software packages will allow you to create a boot CD, so you can actually do a rescue disk and then get the image file and then rewrite it to the disk, to that timeline. The secure boot also gets in the way because it claims that it prevents bootkits, which is really interesting because, you know, with UEFI being out there, you can actually create new viruses that can run real time in the background. You would never ever know, and they could steal data. It just adds a new security flaw, you know, waiting to be happening here. But it does get in the way from traditional boot disks. So you can actually disable that secure boot option, boot off your disk, and then do the recovery. And you have to re-enable it because Windows will basically look at that secure boot option because it had what originally was UEFI secured, and then it will crash if you do not because there's a certificate in Windows, both Windows 8 and 2012, that actually look for that secure boot certificate to be there. If it doesn't, then, you know, not so good. Some basic features for Markham Reflect is obviously disk imaging. They've come out with some new stuff about, because SSD trim is out there, virtual image boots, encryption, image verification. You can reorder or resize partitions on the fly. They're getting quite robust in their feature list. That's why some of these programs out there are kind of nice. Symantec, Ghost, and other programs have not really progressed. They don't support GPT, so those type of imaging platforms don't really work very well, which we'll kind of go over as we progress here. So this one here allows you to back up specific images or partitions, and then of course export those to an image file or just clone the disk outright. And then of course when you save them, there's a report down here on the image that it creates. It also does create a XML extended file which records all the information that you put in about that particular image, which are your comments and other, and the location of where it's stored. Then of course you can browse and remap the image. Some of the features that we already went over based on the category of what you purchase. Now, again, some of these have free versions of them. You know, I'm not saying these are the best out there, but these are what I'm familiar with. There's obviously a huge number of players out there, so you can choose what you like. They do have on the restore, which is interesting, they have a redeploy. Is almost like a kind of like a bare metal restore kind of thing, where you can redeploy it to hardware that is originally it wasn't on, which is kind of nice, which is similar to bare metal restore, which doesn't care about what platform you're actually on. So ease of use to do, well, this one's kind of new. It's nice because it's very simple. It does imaging, but it's mainly for file backup level. It does support, obviously, migration to SSDs, and it does allow you to browse the images that it does create, which is kind of nice. And as you can see from the interface, it's very simple, very clean, made for home users primarily. And the whole point of, obviously, image backups is to maintain in the environment that you have, both software, because if anybody rebuilds a system from scratch, reloading everything, it takes hours, days, weeks, you know, to reload every software, configure it the way it's supposed to be. This just adds to your backup strategy from just doing standard file restores. You just want to actually do image restores as well. Because images are a given point in time, then all your change data will then supplement the image. So everything up to that point, you can actually just restore all your files to that image, and then you'll be back to where you are within less than 30 minutes. A little bit more, of course, if you're backing up or copying files back to your original system. So here, obviously, you can select your disk partitions, export it to, a lot of these programs now can actually do it to the cloud. They can do it to USB, NASs, anything attached to your local network. You can actually export the data to, and then you can see it progresses, and it's going to tell you at the very bottom of the screen there the imaging that specific disk to a given location. And of course, all of them have reporting, logs, files, and stuff which are very important to have, so you can just verify that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Also, the scheduling, like my systems image on a monthly schedule. So I maintain usually 2 images as just a backup, and then of course continuous file backup, you know, throughout that month. This is pretty cool that they do provide for their free version. As you can see, you can do full incremental, differential, and schedule backups, which is usually not included in free software, which is kind of interesting. You can do partition, you know, drive cloning, and of course MBR and GPT support, along with UEFI boot, is also available. So obviously the paid options, you can see on the higher end, you're looking at transferring to VMs, which is usually your standard VHD, or of course VMDK extensions. And the paid, obviously the paid version is not limited as far as how many bits per second that it's backing up, which is kind of the whole point. If you don't really care, then you can actually just use this on the back end and, you know, do what you need to do. Now, GPT under Linux, that was an interesting education. There's a lot of stuff out there where you can manually use like SGDisk to back up one disk to another. There are the tools that I came across are more ISO based. They're not installed applications for imaging, which are kind of interesting. There are some enterprise versions of that, which we'll discuss a little bit later. A couple things I wanted to highlight is that obviously concerns, we're looking at the EFI required, you know, which are the EFI partitions, which need to be there. Otherwise, if it doesn't match with the BIOS that it came from, then you could obviously have issues. On the Mac system, you see that the partitions are sizes multiple 4K, which is, you know, the new standard of larger disks, which of course do cause some issues when you're trying to recover disks and you move something to something that does not, an interface that doesn't support the 4K sector. You can run into some issues of reading or trying to restore things if you're using loose disks as backup drives and so forth. In Linux, also, if you're building your own, you can enable the EFI GUID partition table support, which is, you know, I don't actually rebuild kernels, so this is something new for the people that obviously do. I figure I threw that in there. Under the figure 1, obviously this is the site that I got this information off of, which you can read a little bit more. It's an IBM site, which, of course, since they are the proprietors of the good old EFI stuff. They added some really interesting information for adding it to Linux. Some of the tools that are available, most of these are free tools. Actually, all of these on the list here are free tools. Some of you are probably familiar with those tools. And a lot of these actually are, like CloneZilla, for instance, has been an open source project for a very long time. It incorporates part image and also rsync and a couple other things into what it uses. So it can actually traverse multiple projects that are out there. Like Ping uses part image as part of its tools when it's when you're doing the imaging process, as well as CloneZilla. CloneZilla does a couple things which are quite interesting. It's also standalone, where you can just image the drive, you can clone the drive, you can back it up to an image file, but it also allows you to have a server where you can actually take that image file and then basically use that same image across multiple systems, assuming that the hardware is the same. So you got to be careful about, obviously, that component. You can see that it supports a numerous number of file systems. Of course, GPT is, and the MBR formats for the partitions are supported, as well as both BIOS and UEFI, which are, of course, key. G4L, disk and image cloning, which is the only one I've actually used is CloneZilla. It works great. It's very simple. Their interface is kind of looks like version 5 of what used to be Red Hat, the standard blue background with the little red screens. It's kind of boxy, but it works. G4L disk does actually support, as you see there, GPT in their latest versions, which is great, and also supports, Grub for DOS, which is works out really nice. I'm going to probably try this one out, just because it does work for both Windows and, of course, since it does support GPT. So I just want to kind of figure out how that's going to work for me. And at the bottom of each of these, you'll see the link for this, as well as I have a web link source at the end of the slideshow here. DoClone, this one I found just the other day, which is kind of fun. It is a C-based program that's being supported. All these particular tools are up to date. There's a lot of free utilities that have kind of not been updated since 2010, so they're kind of not on the list. Windows 8 or GPT in general, both for Linux or Windows platforms, which is not helpful to anybody. This one does support GPT, Mac, and of course other odd platforms that are available still. It does. This was last updated in, I think, 2014. It does support 12 operating systems, and I'm not sure how they talk about disk labels in their operating systems. It doesn't actually, or file systems, it doesn't say GPT specifically, which kind of worries me. So, but I haven't tried this one out yet. So it's something that is still to be looked at. Now, this is something that most people in the IT industry, if you work for a company that distributes laptops or is really big on security, they love to do whole disk encryption. There are many vendors out there you know, from Windows to open source to mainstream manufacturers that use PGP, Checkpoint, which is all full disk encryption, which actually lends itself to a couple problems. Is that there are specific signatures and files that are laid out in the operating or on the disk in specific locations that need to be there the next time. Any corruption in the disk due to bad sectors and so forth, if it's not reallocatable, will basically crash a whole drive just because the encryption software, when it pre-boots, will not run. So you either, in the decrypted state, have to be backing off to your local server, or you're doing a byte for byte disk imaging, which is the whole point when you're doing whole disk encryption, is that you need to basically, if you got, you know, a 3 terabyte drive in your system, you're going to create a 3 terabyte image. You can't do compression, you can't change location of sectors or anything. It has to be exact, otherwise your disk will fail. Unless, of course, you go through the process of decrypting your disk, image it, and then re-encrypting it. And, you know, you can go through that process, some do, but it's a pain. If you delete certain files in the, while you're in an encrypted state and you reboot and those files don't exist, like for certain, I'm not going to mention manufacturers, but they put them in places and they don't secure those files. They don't hide the files. So if the user deletes them, you're done. You might as well just re-image it with your factory image or, you know, whatever state, and then copy their data from a backup, because you ain't getting it back. That's pretty much it. Here are some of the source links that I've found this information on, which will be provided. I'll email that so it can be put up on the list. And then that's pretty much it. Any questions, or we're done?
I don't recall you mentioning Norton Ghost except programs that are like Norton Ghost. Is Norton Ghost still viable?
No, not for GPT.
Okay.
They specifically do not support it. There are tricks to use it and then modify the file to make it work.
Sounds like a really undesirable thing to do.
It is. It's really.
You're mucking about with your backup. You want it as orthogonal, as simple, as direct as you can manage.
Right.
You want to need tricks.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, John.
Thank you.
So BioEdge. Dennis is going to give a quickie. And then we're going to bolt out of here. More lunch. You want an extension cord for your extension cord?
No. Who knows what would happen if I disconnect anything?
Oh.
Not me, said the technician. It's a long wire. It is a long wire. It's easy to extend your sequence out. These combination of VGA and audio wires that has prize.
Probably good enough.
What is this development environment of which
Are we on? It looks like, yes, we are on. We aren't going to get much there because what we're going to want to do is screen share. Entire
Well,
screen.
Dennis is figuring that out. I wanted to plug a company that has been around since shortly after the Battle of Hastings. It's called American Science and Flip-Flops. I found one of their old paper catalogs before the millennium, rattling around in my stuff, and went to their website, and lo and behold, they're still around. All sorts of odd things.
So what you're saying is the odd can keep you in business on this year.
Well, apparently, they seem to have survived. I was actually kind of surprised.
Actually,
It reminds me of the story of Paul Tech.
I can't do anything there.
Where a landlord came along one day and said, you know, you are aesthetically unappealing. So even though you're willing to pay me more rent, I'm going to still push you out into the street. So be gone, he said. I have found a better tenant to rent my place. And that building actually stayed vacant for many years thereafter. Really?
Okay.
So, you know, this Rinchy landlord guy.
Probably had a really important could have had somebody else do the business in the neighborhood. That my business might have been you can't explain it when you're sitting down.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cameras here. And unfortunately, never the way that I want to. Basically, at work this time, I'm working on beds now, sleep comfort IQ. Yes, and but specifically sleep IQ is what we work on. BAM Labs does the intelligence on the pump, measuring, keeping track of pressure on the air pillows. And so that's what they do. On the pump, and we're working on another generation. They have a new board, a new processor. And most processors these days have gotten so complex that nobody knows how to set up the pins anymore. The pins are so hard to set up. Arduino's easy. Arduino's easy. Setting up a ARM, a Freescale, or any of the ARM processors with all their peripherals is darn near impossible. So what Freescale does, oh, this is another program for John. Bright Sparks does sync back 3. Very nice program, pure, no image, just files. Much better in my opinion. But here's the processor expert from Freescale. There's the CPU chip with all of its peripherals and all the pins around the outside. And I can add over here on the side, go around here, all sorts of components. Just as an example of what can be done on the thing, I added a mass storage device, turned this little dinky board into a mass storage device in less than a day. Just basically set it up. I've got to go find all the bits to switch and set things up. This processor has an internal 48 megahertz clock. Getting that set up so it drives the USB took a few emails to Freescale, but I finally figured it out. They didn't. As typical, their help their technical support is outsourced to India, and they're young guys that don't know anything. So they're cheaper. Not near as good, but cheaper.
It depends what your criteria for good are.
Right, exactly. And so I ended up, without, seeing I have very little time.
Dave, can we stay an extra couple minutes? We're good.
And I can get this sort of in there. And now, just to show that it does connect, we have a removable disc. I plugged in the board.
That he wrote the software for that makes the
No, I didn't write a thing.
Okay. So he's together the bits and pieces for
Correct.
makes them into this.
And now it is a drive over here someplace. If I go over here and actually find it, yeah, there it is.
It must be freaking magic.
It is magic. And it's only 12K, but I don't have much RAM. It's a RAM.
Dancing bear is not how well it dances.
Correct. It's the fact that it is a bear. It's the fact that it turned it into an MSD, which is a huge software stack, in a couple presses of the button. Now, there? To the those connectors on the side, they're actually trying to emulate an Arduino. Arduino has standard pins that allow shields to be put on top of an Arduino. And that's if you haven't worked with Arduino, you don't recognize them. There's a certain set of pins and configuration that are GPIOs, voltage, all sorts of things. That's what I'm going to have to figure out next week. Is we have a eMMC, a flash card, and I've got to figure out how to disconnect it from RAM and put it to the SPI for the disk. So now starts the tough work of figuring out how to add the stuff that they don't have in their library. And yeah, there's real work to do. But this got me a tremendous amount of distance in just a few days. Probably 2 that I've actually been working on it. And not the full days anyways. So that's mostly what I wanted to show. I've used the Processor Expert Freescale. I was looking for it earlier last year because I couldn't find it again. It used to be just Code Warrior. This is now, if you don't recognize it, this is Eclipse. So you've got a ton of user interface that you can throw together. I don't really like Eclipse, but for this, it's nice. It's not necessarily, Kevin wrote the extra lines, because I never do, and it's not really about debugging. With a USB stack, I defy anybody to single step through a USB stack. You can't do it, because it's real time. A USB stack, you have to do real time. So it's not about debugging. It's about this, the Processor Expert.
I just go by what I read on the web. I cut and paste that.
Yes.
About the robust debugger, that's the title.
That correct. I gave you the website. It's basically, that's what they talk about. They talk about the debugging. I talk about configuring the pins, which is more than I want to do. And in this case, I've got two versions, the Processor Expert and the one that they've already got, that they got to market with. And no, I don't even want to merge the two. I'm just going to port their code over to here. It's the easier step. Any questions? MK20 to MK22. They're close. Yeah. But as with most processors these days, there are so many in their offerings. They're all custom. Somebody wanted, in this case, a USB clock, an internal USB clock. The 20 doesn't have it, the 22 does.
USB 2?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I suspect that's software. That's merely a matter of software.
USB 2 is 14 megahertz. USB 1.1 is 12 point something.
But what's 3?
5.2 gigabits.
Ah.
3.1 is 10 gigabits.
Ooh, yes, that's going to take more clocks, and probably why they can't do it on this chip.
Right.
Right. This is an internal clock with no crystal. You aren't going to get there. So, but this is cute. This is really cute. And the amount of time that it has just saved me is irreplaceable. We're done.
Oh, by the way, you're still working in San Francisco?
No, I'm down in Campbell now.
What's the company you work at?
Fitbit.
What?
Fitbit.
Fitbit. They're a wearable.
Yeah. Yeah. The wrist.
Looking for a permanent person.
Well, of course. Yeah. You want a job? Maybe. Yeah. Send me a resume. Nope.
Wrap it up.
So I can send you my resume on the same
DA Roofer
DA
at Gmail.
It's on the